All right, thank you so much, everyone. Rohan, take it away. I'm really excited for this talk.
All right. Hello, everybody. As Sam mentioned, the title of this talk is GSuite Security. Everyone wants it, but not everyone gets it. And just a FYI, I will be monitoring the chat. So after the talk, if I have some time, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. But let's get started right on this, and we'll see what we can cover today. So a quick background of who I am. I'm a full-time student at Cal State University, Fullerton, and I do bug bounties for fun. So bug bounties are something that I do for research, for finding unique ways to get into companies. So even though there are web security stuff that I usually find, I also tend to focus on getting into internal access through different means. So you might have seen some of my weird things that I find and disclose. So those are the things I focus on. G Suite is one of them, since there's a lot of things you can do on G Suite, and there's a lot of ways to mess up on that as well. You can find me on Twitter as Uranium Hacker. I usually post a lot about security things, blogs that I find interesting, and everything else like that. I have my own blog at sites.google.com/securifying.com/sec blogs. So if you guys go to that, I have multiple links to different things I find. Some of them are specific vulnerabilities, so it could be like IDOR on some company, or some of them are more generic that are widespread. And some of the things that I'm covering today are already, like, some of them are already on the blog. So you guys can refer to the blog and use that for your own use as well. So let's kind of get started into what is G Suite. For people that don't know what G Suite is, it's basically Google's version of Gmail, Google Drive, Google Calendars, pretty much everything combined in a software as a service designed for companies. So for example, when we use gmail.com, we have access to Gmail, Google Drives, Google Calendars for that email. And Google decided, let's bring that to companies. So now we have, if you have a Bugcrowd, if you're a Bugcrowd employee, if you have at bugcrowd.com, if Bugcrowd uses G Suite, you can use that to send emails directly. So you don't need to worry about setting up email servers through other companies. Google will handle that for you. So there's, like, you want email, G Suite has that. You want calendar, G Suite will give you that. You want shared drives between companies, you get all of those as well. So it basically has combinations of everything. And then the best part is you can use that to log into other places. So if you have Google Cloud Platform, that's another thing you can log into. So it's basically a combined product for all the Google features out there. And that's the best part of it, since everyone wants to use it, but it also leads to super easy vulnerabilities, because what happens is admins will sign up for G Suite and start importing employees, but they will not realize that there's going to be security issues with that. There could be employees sharing things that this will not be sharing outside to everyone. So the admins won't realize there are settings that G Suite has where you can click on a button and prevent the whole leak. That's why it's really fun to look at G Suite, because if you get something, it can usually be a critical issue for a company if they disclose a lot of info, or you could use that info out there that they have disclosed to chain it to further attacks. And I will go over those when I mention them. So let's first start with the first one, and that's Google Calendars. And I have a small note for everybody on that is I probably still not be able to see your meetings, just saying that, because everyone tends to leave their meetings open. So for example, the question behind this that resulted on us looking at Google Calendars is we were testing out a couple of bugs in a platform, and we noticed there was Google Calendar being used. And we were curious, like, what happens if I put an employee's email on my Google Calendar, since Google allows sharing calendars and importing calendars. So we decided, let's give it a shot. And I really like a company to hack, which was Uber. So we decided to try some Uber emails and see if it would work. And it did. So that's where we knew that it was going to work perfectly, and to go from there. So a couple of things that motivated is calendars are pretty sensitive. When you create a calendar, when you create events, you kind of tend to add a lot of sensitive data there. For example, if you're flying somewhere, your information of your flight will be there. For companies, it's also more of meetings. So we wanted to see what kind of information we can get, and can we automate this process. So for example, let's say we can find one calendar for each company, for each employee. Instead of manually putting this email every time, we wanted to see if we could automate. So it was a programming challenge as well for us to figure this one out. And also, as I said, we wanted to see more info, because personally for me, web security is a really good topic, but I also tend to show to companies that your websites might be secure, but your employees are kind of giving out details that this will not be giving out. And calendar was a perfect way to show that. So we started creating test cases. We started looking into different things, and I'll be going over like a little bit technical aspect of that in the next slide. So when we were looking into this, we decided to first check on Google Calendar, the Google section where you can add other people's calendar, but it was manual. So you go there, you put an email, and you're putting company's email there, but there's, it's manual. You have to try for every email, copy, paste, and see how it works, which kind of sucked. So we found out that Google also allows you to embed calendars, which was even better because now I can just add emails and then see the response, because there are different status codes for different things. So 200 means the calendar is public or something could be accessed for that. And if it gives 404, then the calendar is not public or it does not exist. Knowing that, we could easily create a script because now we don't have to worry about anything. We already know it's 200, right? So if it hits, like if you are giving it 100 emails, 50 of them are 200, likely chances it's public. So it was pretty interesting for us to look at that aspect. And that's like an example of this is when you look at the embed. I have a picture here for my calendar. And when I go on it, you can see it gives out some information. Since I'm a student, there's nothing much, but try to see it from a company point of view, right? If I have a Bugcrowd, if I have Uber, some employee has this public calendar out there, there could be a lot of sensitive data. For example, Zoom meetings, which can be accessible by everyone since by default, Zoom doesn't have a password requirement. So as a sysadmin on Zoom, you can set that, but not every company does it. So it was just easy to just jump into meetings and have some kind of sensitive access with that. So for example, we'll see Zoom links, join any meetings you want. You have internal Google Docs. I'll also explain why that matters when we go over the Google Docs section and why private Google Docs should remain private. And also saved password for internal sites. So I actually have a story to tell about that. And before that, let's look at this. So here's an example of a real meeting we joined when we're testing. And it was pretty interesting. You go to the employee's calendar, you click on it, and there you go. It had a Zoom link. And we knew exactly what time it was. So we dropped into it right then. And the meeting was like barely starting. So as soon as we knew that will happen, we decided to leave right away since we didn't want to stay on the meeting. And the best part of this is when you click on it, since Zoom allows you to rename your names. So for example, in this talk, I originally had my club name. I changed it back to my personal name. You could do the same thing when you join this meeting because at first it's based on your login. But since you already know the employee's name, you just plug that in and you have access to it. And you can like kind of fist people to think you are a real employee. So now we decided to automate it. That's where a little bit of technical part comes. As of this morning, we have disclosed this exploit/script that makes it easier to do all these checks. It uses hunter.io, which is a email fetching website. So hunter.io has a public list of all emails out there. It makes it easier for you to see all the employee emails and then go from there and do any other test you have to. So what we did was we decided to use Hunter to fetch all the emails, create a Python script that will check all the emails for the calendar link and see if it's 200. If it is, it will save it to a TXT file. And if you want, you could even go to the length, which we did, but it's not on the script, is you could take pictures of all of these calendars. So you know which one's valid, which one is not. And it reduces a lot of work in your side after you have the script down. But there is a little bit of a pros and con kind of thing for the script is after we disclosed the blog. So we wrote about the Google Calendar quite a while ago. And after we disclosed it, I think a lot of bug bounty hunters decided to try it out. So obviously it was easy to script. So a lot of people decided to create scripts out of it. And Google probably noticed that. So they have rate limited calendar.google.com now. So you probably want to be careful of how much requests you sent, because you probably don't want to send like 500 requests a second or something, since you'll kind of get rate limited on that. There are probably bypasses to it. The script doesn't cover that yet. I am looking at some of the bypasses this week. So there have been a couple we have found to bypass the rate limit, but we'll see if we can embed that on the script or not. We'll have to discuss with Google in regards to that. So if you are interested in doing this attack, if you're interested in Google Calendar, a quick TLDR is basically you run the script. It allows both a domain and a txt file. So let's say if you have a txt of all emails for a company, you can just pass that into the script. It will analyze those. Or if you give it a domain, it will grab Hunter, and then it will use Hunter to grab those emails. You just have to make sure you have the Hunter API key. So make sure you have that on the Hunter API.python file, and you will be able to run it. So let's see a sample. So here you have a sample where I'm showing you the test.txt file with emails. I run that with cal.py, and then you can notice that it finds all of those awesome calendars that you can access. Some of these will go private today. I made them public just for this talk, so I will make them private after this talk. But you are definitely free to try other emails. So if you know company emails, if you are on a pen test and you want to try it out, feel free to use those emails, put that in on the script, and see if it'll work. And I have modified the script on this video a little bit that you guys are seeing because I wanted to show the real output as it was happening. Otherwise, what the script will do is it will output the content to the test.txt file. Now, we covered the exploit part. As a hacker, it's really easy to exploit. As a bug bounty hunter, it's really easy to find. But the problem is knowing how to fix them. That's why when I was creating this talk, when I was discussing with some of my friends, we're thinking, so we cover the aspect of how to fix this. Because obviously there's no point in us disclosing a security issue or disclosing things like this that can be mass exploited and not have a fix for companies. So that's why each part of this talk will have an aspect where you can fix this if you are a G Suite admin for a company. So if you are watching this talk and you work at a company and you haven't received a report about Google Calendars and you don't know if you're vulnerable yet, just try this out and make sure your company is secure. So for example, here we have a simple G Suite admin panel. What you'll do is once you go to the panel, you can go and search for calendars. So when you look for calendar settings, it shows you the calendar service. So how G Suite works is each app is known as a service and you can turn it on and off for everyone. Obviously, you don't want to turn it off for all your employees to make yourself secure because at that point, no one can use it. But what you can instead do, it change the external sharing options. Now, how this works is, let's say an employee is super into making their calendar public. There are cases where those are needed. For example, if you work in HR, if you work in some kind of a marketing team, and you want to let your client customers know when you're free and when you're busy. So you probably want your calendar public. But as a G Suite admin, you don't want your employee disclosing meetings to other people. So a perfect way to do that is you'll change your calendar settings and you'll say, hey, just make it free/busy. So what that will do is it will just show on the public calendar when it's free and when it's busy, so it won't disclose anything else. For example, if you were to go to Ubers or someone, and if you try putting one of the employees' email, even if they have it public, it will just say when they're free and busy. It doesn't give you any vital information at all. So that's why it's good as a G Suite admin to utilize this. Usually it's not by default turned on. So you probably want to go there and do that. If you do this, it will force all employees that as the maximum shareability, because sometimes employees can override some of the G Suite settings when they're doing manual shares. But for this case, it will be the maximum they can do. So they won't be allowed to do any public disclosed information. So they won't be able to disclose meeting details or anything like that. And before I move to the other part of this talk, I just want to recap to the Google Calendar part. As I said, the script is out there now, so you will be able to use it. The script is on Bug Bounty site GitHub account. I'll also probably share my screen and then show the link after this talk so that you guys can follow up. The talk link or the Google Slides will be made public. I'll probably put it on my Twitter so you guys will have access to that as well. But as I said, the script is online. You can just utilize it. Just make sure you use it in a way that you don't get rate limited. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of false positives out of it. And see if you can find some companies. We did find it on a lot of companies. So for example, on the report we mentioned, we found it on Uber, Shopify, and others. Our Shopify report is actually already disclosed. So if you want to see more detail in it, if you want to go more technical or see like what kind of impacts we tried to prove, that might be a really good report to look at. Now let's look at private docs. I did mention on the Google Calendar that when you have access to a calendar, probably start looking for Google Docs and see what you can do with it. And the reason is private docs need to be remain private, right? You don't want anyone random in the internet to access it. And we have found a lot of companies mess up on that as well. So we're kind of looking at how can a company's, like how often are employees sharing internal links and giving it to other people. Turns out it's a lot. So you'll see this is fine picture on the side on all of the slides today, because pretty much every company is messing up on this. And sadly, it's not a fault of a G Suite admin, since you probably want to allow shared docs, but it's when employees share it with anyone with the link can access and think that it won't go on the public web when they put it on like Trello or something. So let's look at it from an attacker viewpoint before we start looking at fixing it. So one of the common ways to do it, and I have tweeted about this, other hackers have also tweeted about it, is finding internal links through Google Docs. So if you do Google Doc, which is basically you are giving it a certain parameters to specifically look for, you'll say in text, find every links that have mentioned google.com/a/company.com. So for example, if it's Bugcrowd, it'll be /bugcrowd.com. And you'll probably see, you'll probably paste it on Google and then try to see what it does, right? So when you do in text, it will try to mention everything. And it's not just docs.google.com, it will list. You'll also see groups.google.com. You'll see other Google links that this company is using. And sometimes it is pretty interesting to test out on Google and see what kind of links you'll find. So for example, if you want to go and find for DoD, you could try that for the DoD since they have a VDP and see if you can report that. I know for sure Uber also had some of those incidents in the past. We did find those issues and reported to them. But as I said, the problem is like you cannot enforce this perfectly in Google or in G Suite. So you just have to monitor these things, and we'll cover that on the defense point of view. Some websites that are useful you can look at also, if you're not using Google Doc, is paste that same query in GitHub. Since if there are GitHub issues, GitHub commits, they might mention that saying, based on this Google Doc for our company here, see how it works, right? And you can probably try to find some internal links with that. Another one is Trello. A hacker, I forgot his name now, couple of months ago found that employees were sharing a lot of sensitive data on Trello. And one of them definitely is Google Docs, since they will create like internal cards, internal tasks, and then put it on a Trello instance, and then they'll start sharing Google Docs based on that task. So even though Trello won't have much sensitive data for that task, if you click on the Google Doc, you can see like meeting details, you can see product reviews. We have found for a specific company, cannot mention the name, but basically we're able to get their Google Doc that had all upcoming products till 2020. So basically accessing every upcoming features out there. And we already know what those features will cover. So you'll usually find this kind of info. And as I said before, it's not necessarily a critical issue right away. You can probably even escalate it further. We have found internal links within Google Docs. So when you find a Google Doc that you can access, probably look for different things you can find there and start querying. Look at the Google Doc. Obviously, don't download it. Just look at it from the online point of view and see if you can find internal links. We have found internal links that no one could find, since like it was a random thing at the end and random thing at the start. But if you click on it, it was accessible to everyone and you could log in. So there are you can go from a medium severity, just finding a Google Doc, to potential critical by logging into their internal instance, which probably has a lot more sensitive info. And another quick example is PAPALY, Papaly. It's a own bookmark thing. Not a lot of people use it, but we have seen a lot of companies have employees that are personally using it, and they will share like some internal links. The picture I'm going to show next has a lot of information, but you won't be able to access any of those Google Docs. You'll just be able to see the name. So there's no point in reporting. So for example, this one is an example of us getting to some of the links. These were Google Slides for onboarding new employees and also onboarding new features for March 2019. And then we also have for Uber, here's a employee that had mentioned all of their trackers, all of their documents, names and stuff. But all of these are private, since Uber kind of forces employees to not share them, since they do have monitors and audit logs and all of those. So that's why I share this picture. Is there's not a lot of sensitive data coming out of this. But definitely, for example, some of the internal links, you can use that to do more recon. So sometimes just finding these data are not worth reporting. I just want to highlight there so that you guys, like anyone watching it, doesn't create a lot of noise for companies. But definitely use this to see if you can find more things out of the recon and then try more attack vectors from it. So how do you actually fix this, right? Because as I said, there's no point in disclosing this and then telling the company good luck. So what you actually do is in Google, you can create alerts and audits. So when you go to your homepage and click on the menu bar, it has an option for reporting audits and alerts. So on the audit section, you'll select Google Drive, which makes it easier. And then you'll select anything that has the visibility change from internal to external. So for example, here you'll see I have a couple of documents. One of them was anyone with the link within the domain to private for Securify Inc. So you can also have only people within the domain to access it if they have a link. You can also make it private for a specific domain. And there are also like none to can edit. So when you share files, and if you're a GSuite admin, you can utilize this to see if employees are externally sharing files to other individuals. And you can even see the logs of who are accessing it. So it makes it easier if you get a report, if you are working in the GSuite admin section for a company and you get a HackerOne or a Bugcrowd report that says, I got access to all of your docs that has VPN crest, that has password, all of these sensitive info. You can use this to actually get the logs of that and see if someone had exploited this in the past, or even the hacker reporting is not reporting you all of the things needed. So now before I move into the other section, I do know there are some questions that were asked on the chat, so I'm just going to quickly answer one of them. Someone asked if we could share the calendar script. It is already public on the Bug Bounty site, so I will show the link at the end of the presentation here, so you'll have access to it even after the slides. But let's move on to the next one. Google Sites. Now this is where the fun actually is, if I were to say it, because we have found things on Google Sites recently due to a new change that Google added that not a lot of people realize has happened yet. So internal informations are always fun, especially in Google Sites. You find a lot of crazy things, I'll say, a lot of internal infos, onboarding data, VPN creds. We have found internal login informations and all of these. So the question is, new Google Sites came out, so how can we exploit this? What happened was originally, I will show the comparison in a while, is there was an old Google site that allowed you to link or see all the Google Sites a company had. And then Google decided to make a new design with new features on it. So if you go to my blog, which is on securifying.com/secblogs, it is using the new Google Site version. And that's when I was looking at it, and it looks super interesting to see how it works. So this results in a new exploit that not a lot of companies are aware of. So let's compare the old versus new Google site right now. So the old one, for example, if you were to go for Uber, you'll go to sites.google.com/a/uber.com. And what this will do is it will show you my sites in Uber. And since you're not an employee, you don't have any sites. But if you click on browse sites, it will list you all public sites that you can access. So this was in the old version of Google Sites. And it was super easy, right? You don't have to guess a company's Google site link. You don't have to do anything. You just go click on browse. If it's public, you see it and see if there's sensitive data there. For most of the companies, we couldn't find a lot of sensitive data on these cases because those are usually like public data they are sharing with customers. In case of Uber, it was with drivers and riders. So it'll be like coupons. It'll be upcoming events, referral programs, and all of that. So those were not sensitive. But then Google decided to add a new Google Sites feature. So now all of the Google Sites link, if you're using a new Google site, is sites.google.com/uber.com/the title of the blog. So it is not something you can easily list for for a company or like all of the Google sites. So you'll have to actually brute force it. But then at the same time, one thing Google did easier is on the old Google sites, if you were to try to find these by brute forcing it, you have to make sure you're logged in to your Google account, right? So if you need a Gmail or anything, you'll just need to be logged in with at least one account in Google, and then you could view these things. So what Google did was it made it easier to brute force with the new one. So you can just have a WFOs link with a dictionary of files and then brute force it for that company. So here's an example for securifying.com that I utilize to test all of these things is you'll pass in the rough large directories, which is a simple online brute force directory from SecList, and you'll look for all the 200 content out there. So 200 means these sites are publicly accessible with anyone. You don't even have to be logged in. And you'll go to sites.google.com/securifying.com and then fuzz that. And you can see in the result, we have minimum of like 4 that were found. So if you want to test it, I have some flags on this Google Sites for my domain. So if you test the script, if you want to run those, you'll be able to find them there. There are some Google Docs or Google Sites that I have made just for people to test it out and see if it works for them. So this one is really nice to have and really easy to test as well. So just run a WFOs and you have access to a lot of sensitive info. We did test it on a company. I asked for permission from the company when I was doing this presentation and they declined to be mentioned. So I won't be able to mention their name, but it's a really useful thing to test out on all the companies that you are part of. And one thing I would recommend corporate employees. So if you're a bug bounty manager working for a company, is to actually try to add GSuite Security to your bug bounty measures. There are a couple of companies that do that. So I'd like to give a shout out to Netflix here. Is they recently added that on their Bugcrowd briefing, where they mentioned that if you find a security issue on their GSuite config, so not a security issue on GSuite, but something specific to Netflix, they will pay you bounties for that. So for example, if you're able to find their internal groups that you could access, they'll pay you bounties for those as well. So I'll request, like, if companies can do it, this is a really good measure to take, because if you realize, like, as I have showed in the pictures here, there are a lot of sensitive infos that these docs could have. Even though they won't give you a full critical impact, it is not that hard that once you deep dive into this, that you can use info from these docs and link them to other places and actually get a critical out of this. So now how do we actually fix this? And this is kind of a bad part for the new Google Sites, is there's no easy way to fix. Because what Google did is integrated the new Google Sites into Google Drive. So what that means is previously each Google site was a site in itself. So you could have security measures implemented on G Suite. But with the new one, it's actually a file in your Google Drive. So companies cannot say that all G Suite new Google sites have to be private, because there's no way to restrict that in a way. What you'll have to do is you'll have to restrict permission sharing in Google Drive itself and limit it through that. So that's kind of a bad thing for some of the companies. It's really hard to prevent this. And one thing I'll just recommend is using the previous idea I showed about Google Docs, is auditing these and monitoring changes on the file permission chains and actually fixing it based on that. So you could send emails to your employees saying, we just noticed that you have disclosed this, Google site to the public. What is going on? Why are you doing this? And the past places that I have worked, we did actually do those to make sure employees, when they shared files, we were alerted of that. So if you're on a security team, probably start creating alerts to get monitored for those, and try to see if you can find other companies doing it and report it to them as well. So I'd like to do in conclusion real quick. This was not that long of a presentation because I wanted to answer some questions people probably have. In the conclusion, going over Google Calendar real quick, most companies have public calendars accessible for all, so it's super easy to test. And what I'll recommend is, once you find a Google Calendar with the script or something, go to your personal calendar and import it there, since Google allows that. And what you can do from there is you can actually search that calendar. So their previous things that they had public, like their meetings, their upcoming meeting links, you can search them by string. So once you have added it, you could search for like resume and see if there are candidates, like interview candidates, whose info you can get out of it. Or if there are Zoom links that you can publicly access and then access to their meetings from that. So find Zoom links, Google Docs, internal password. I actually mentioned we had a story for that. So what happened is, a company we're testing, we didn't find this in a lot of companies, but one company specifically, we decided to see if they have a password. So we put password on it and we're like, all right, let's see if we can get something out of it. And there was one link that came out, which was super interesting. Like, it had a Google Calendar with a username and a password on it for an external link that was being used. So it was a third party the other company was using to store some of their videos. So they will interview candidates and they'll store the videos there. And since it was shared with other employees, they wanted to make sure everyone could log in. So they decided, let's just put the password in the calendar, easier for everybody. And one of the employee had the calendar public. So when we logged in, we could access all the videos for interview candidates for their beta release for their password, for also like if they're hiring someone, you could find those links as well. And the tool, as I said, is already public. I think Ben already posted the link as well there. So you can find it on github.com/bugbounty-site/cal-exe. I'll also highlight the bug bounty site is expect to see more tools coming out of that. It's a research project I'm working with a couple of friends. So we will be posting a lot of new exploits for like things like Google Calendar or any other research that we do. So there are a couple of the exploits in the pipeline there right now that we probably will disclose in a couple of months. So be in the lookout for those as well. For Google Docs, as I said, most documents are shared in a way that's accessible by anyone with the link. And the point is, employees try to think that if I share this, if I create this in a way that only people with link can access, it's secure, right? Because the link is hard to guess. But what is not realized in those matters is someone could put that on Trello or someone could put that somewhere that a Google Doc will show it. So for an attacker, it's a perfect point of view where you can just grab it and then attack it from there. So as I said, you can either look for .google.com/a/domain.com, or you could go for docs.google.com/a/domain.com, because docs will only show you Google Docs. If you just do .google.com, you'll see more of groups. You'll see spreadsheets, slides, and all of those as well. So there are like more things you can access with that. If it is super sensitive, report it. As I said, if not, try to escalate it. Do not report like, if it comes to it, yes, it could be a medium and you could report it, but I'll always recommend using the info there to actually try to get a critical. As I mentioned before, you could find internal links. So try going to those and see even if you can log in, like if there are creds for those links, you could probably try logging in with creds. And once you do, you have a full critical there most of the time, because these links will have sensitive info. We have had where we could log in, get access to all the user info for a company since it was an internal admin panel. So you probably want to check those out and see if you can escalate to the max. Do not make the mistake we did, is we will sometimes report it right as soon as we found it, and it will get marked as a medium. Then when we go back, we're like, never mind, we can get it to a critical. Here we go. And we give them more info afterwards. But I feel like it's better to actually escalate it at first before you even report it, because it's easier for companies to actually read the report, see what the issue is, and then categorize it for their internal fix. Because when you send a report at first, and if it's a medium, at first, like if you haven't escalated yet, they might categorize that medium and then start fixing it based on that, compared to you actually escalating it to critical at first and them actually fixing it right away. Another thing is Google Sites. As I said, WFOs is super easy. There are other directory brute forces that you guys can use. I just tend to use WFOs since it's easier, it's easy to install, and it has other stuff where you can import it to Python scripts and actually create automated tools out of those. So you can use a dictionary file. I have shown some of the links. You can just send a dictionary file and then send it to Google Sites and then brute force links out of those. So in my case, it's securifying.com. Just put other links on there and you'll be able to find those. So that's pretty much from my side. I'll try to see if I can show you guys the GitHub link. So as you guys can see, this is a super easy to use script. So we have the hunter API.py file, and this is where you have to add your script. If you want to make it safer, just use the environment variables for Python, and then you'll be able to just export your API key as environment on your terminal, on your Linux bash, whatever you use, and then directly use the tool. So how the tool works is you'll just specify Python 3. It's a Python 3 applicable tool, and then the domain and output.txt where it saves it. If you already have a list of emails, just pass in the txt file and then the output txt file, and it will be able to scan it for those. Showing it how it works is a super simple logic. It checks if it's a txt file. If it is, it will go through the txt, check all of the links that it can, and if it does, it will start writing it to a file that's already created. So that's the output file that you pass in. If it's an email, it will use the Hunter API functionality that's on the get emails function, and it will get all the emails out there. The one thing that will probably be a disadvantage is you can probably try stuff like, you can try this with Hunter API, but the problem is if you are not getting a growth link or something like that, it will not work because you won't get all the emails. So that's probably going to be a bad aspect of it, is you might not have all the emails of a company since Hunter will limit that. And I kind of wanted to mention what Ben also wrote is you can use Burp Intruder for this for sure. We used Burp Intruder at first. So it's an easier way to use Burp Intruder if you don't want to install tools. Just pass in all the emails that you have. So with Hunter, you can even export a CSV file. So you can directly import it on a Burp Suite and then start running scans with Intruder. But as I said before, make sure to try to go not beyond the rate limit, because that will probably hinder your work. So the rate limiting is pretty fast in Google Calendar now. So you probably want to make sure you are threading it properly. You're doing, if you need to do timeouts, you're doing those properly as well. Because if you look at the script right now, the script doesn't cover that. It just hits all of these requests with a head call and then just sees if it's valid or not. That's for the calendar exe. I also wanted to mention for Google Sites, you can also use Intruder for that. So you don't necessarily need WFOs. You can also pass all the directories there and then just make it hit for that specific domain. So that's another good way to approach this as well. I think that's all I wanted to cover for this talk. If there's any questions you guys have, I'm free to answer that. I have this talk booked till 11, I believe. So we are like half an hour early. So feel free to ask any questions. I'll try to start answering them. I think someone asked about a GSuite takeover. So I'm not actually sure what that means, but I know in the past what you could do is you could take over GSuite accounts in a way where there was a security issue on GSuite itself where you could redirect a company's email to another instance or a company's domain to another instance. So that is no longer possible. There are cases where I have seen people try to report things like I can claim x.company.com in GSuite and you won't be able to sign up anymore. But the thing is, those are not a security issue in a way because companies can just reach out to Google and let them know and get that account closed and re-register if they need to do it. So if that's the GSuite takeover you're mentioning, even though it's possible, it's not a security issue. But if you do find a way to redirect a company's domain, an email, or anything like that from GSuite to other places, then you'll probably want to report that to Google. I'll just highlight something. Let me see if I can load that real quick. Regarding GSuite is I had that similar incident. If you guys, before my username used to be Uranium Hacker on HackerOne, but if you guys check the disclosure reports that I had, there was one with Uber where you could authorize issue in GSuite. So what happened was I was able to redirect UberEats.com to a different domain or a different subdomain of theirs. And basically it allowed for me to transfer it to other places. So the worst part for this is it was a Google bug as well. So I had to report it to Google. So in those cases, keep in mind of like what you're finding. The Google Sites, Google Calendars, and Google Docs kind of misconfigs are not something Google has to fix since they already have a feature for it. So it's more for companies to fix it on themselves, and those you can report. But if it's things like where you can redirect a whole domain or where you can snoop into emails with that. So G Suite had a vulnerability where you could, if a company had an MX set to google.com or whatever G Suite requires, and it was not registered in G Suite already, you'll just go and sign up as that domain and you'll be able to listen to all the emails coming into it since they did not validate you actually own the domain or not. And those things you actually want to report to Google and not to the companies because it's not something they can prevent. Hopefully that answers that question. If anyone has questions about other things about G Suite, there are other things you can find with G Suite misconfigs. There are still like kind of private and I'm still looking into those more. So I'll probably add more of those in the slides or anything else in the future and probably tweet about them. So feel free to follow on the Twitter account and I'll be able to share more details there as well. Let me see. I don't think there's any more questions on the chat. If there is, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, everyone that's watching, you guys can throw in questions in the chat, and like Rohan said, we can just fill in the next 20 minutes riffing on questions. So it looks like we just got one in, actually.
Yeah, so it seems like someone's asking about token APIs with like if a Google Doc has it or if a Google Calendar has it. If you cannot verify it, so some of the token APIs, you can probably test it out. So if it's a Dropbox, Slack, Mailgun or anything, try it out and then see if it works. But if it does not, and if you cannot verify it, I'll recommend still reporting it to some extent. So like let them know on HackerOne or Bugcrowd, but do expect that it won't always be a critical right away. And you probably want to be careful about like how you're reporting it too, right? So don't try to go as out of scope as possible. Obviously, if it's something really bad, then you probably want to report it right away. So if it's a token you cannot use, I'll say it will be a medium severity depending on the company. So not always a guarantee that it will be a critical. That's why, like, look at the doc more, see if you can find more info out of it. Someone asked why a docs.google.com/a/ that is going to SSO. So with the Google Docs, how it works is specifically that link that you shared. That's just a link to load Google Docs. So it's not actually loading the documents directly. So those will depend on how their G Suite login works. For example, if you work on a company side, you'll know that you can have Okta and one login and then make those log into Google accounts. So that's why it's probably going to that Microsoft account. Is you have the company has an SSO where it says you have to log in at Microsoft first, and it will actually let you log into all the apps we have, and G Suite is one of those apps. So it will have a
That's a
similar
great
case
point.
on sites.google.com/a/domain.com, and you probably want to make sure that you don't actually just rely on that and say, hey, they have SSO, it won't be vulnerable, because the documents can still be public. So the end thing you want to look at is the document links directly, not just google.com/a/domain.com.
Yeah, that's a great point. The link that, for those watching on the stream later, the link that was shared in the Twitch chat was docs.google.com/a/whatever domain that is the company. Like, so for example, it'd be bugcrowd.com. Like Rohan was saying, you can't just like go to that and necessarily load up the docs, because it's going to go to a login flow. And in this case, the user in the chat tried it and it went to Microsoft, or like Rohan was saying, it could go to Okta or something else. So that's how that kind of login flow works. Let's see if we have any other questions in chat. Do you work from your local machine, or do you use a VPS setup and work from that?
So we do have a VPS setup for this instead of a local. And the reason is, as I mentioned, there will be rate limits. So we didn't want our IP to get banned, specifically for Google calendars and stuff, since if we get the IP banned, we're pretty much banned out of Google. So it kind of will suck. That's one reason why we do use a VPS setup. You won't need a really crazy VPS setup. You can get a simple, like a Linode instance for, I think it's like $5 a month, and you'll be able to use that to run the basic scripts. Especially things like the CalExe or WFOs, those won't take a lot of memory space or take a lot of like uses from your VPS, so you won't have to worry about running out of bandwidth or running out of memories on those. For WFOs, usually not. There are people who have specific files they create themselves. So I'll say once you start noticing a pattern, for sure do that and create your own directories or dictionaries out of it. For a start, I just tend to use raft-lars-directories.txt from seclist, since it has most of the files or the dictionaries that I need. And I just tend to run that. And if I see a pattern, then I'll try to create it based on those. So for example, just throwing it out, like if a company has all their Google sites title name after a food name or something, right? Then you probably just want to have a dictionary file or a txt file with a bunch of food names and try those and then see if it'll work. Because if it does, then you'll just be fine. Like you won't have to create other noise. You'll get a higher rate of success. So most of your links will come out being valid instead of just sending seclist link and then getting a lot of invalid links out of it. So it just depends on, if you see a pattern, create your own dictionaries. Otherwise, any dictionary should be fine. Thank you. Yeah, it has been a really fun thing. Like the reason I wanted to give a talk is when it worked on a specific company in Bugcrowd, I was like, this could get pretty bad for all other companies as well. So might as well let all the hackers know it's useful and at the same time cover it for corporate part. So as I have mentioned, like if you work in a company and you have G Suite, probably start looking into how to secure it, since that is the biggest, I'll say one of the biggest attack vectors at this point, because there's a lot of things that people could access with it.
Awesome. Well, if folks have in the Twitch chat have any more questions, feel free to throw them in. And while we've got them here on the stream, otherwise we can fill in the next 10, 15 minutes in other ways too.
And you can also always like message me on Twitter. I think my DM is always open, so you can feel free to hit me up on Uranium Hacker on Twitter, and I can answer questions there as well. Usually I tend to respond pretty fast. It's just if you don't hear a response from me, it's probably because the message went to Twitter's spam filter that they tend to have. So it probably will take me some time at that point.
All right, then I guess we'll move on. Thank you so much, everyone. Please throw whatever emoji you want to use in chat. Throw it in there. Oh, actually, we just got some more questions in, so maybe we can keep it going here, because it looks like we just got 2 right there. The first one was, well, actually, let's go for the second one that came in, and then we'll go to the first one. So the Wolf Droid asked, when finding bugs in GitHub, like information regarding people of company, let's see, I'm trying to decipher what their question is. How to be sure when you're finding that information?
Yeah, I think the question is more of like, if you get a token in GitHub, or if you find something about an employee, like through an employee of a company at GitHub, like how do you realize it's a bug and it's not something that they're personally using? In those cases, it's probably best for me, like personally, what I do is there are personal GitHub accounts of employees I tend to look, but I also tend to find specific employees' GitHub accounts that are registered with the company. So I think I tweeted this in the past, is if you look up company dash and then asterisk and look for all the users, those usually are GitHub accounts for employees working at that company. And what I tend to do is from there, I decide to do similar things that all the other hackers do, is download the GitHub repos and then use GitRub or other tools to find for informations on the repo files. And usually if you find a token there, try to validate it. So you might want to see like if the information is actually accurate. Even if it's old, like some of those tokens could have been committed like 2 years ago, but they could still be valid. So one classic examples, France has mentioned this in the past, is the Slack API tokens. Someone will put it out on GitHub, they'll delete it, but they'll forget to rotate it. So you'll just be able to use that token to actually read messages and read other informations out there. So if you do get a token and you want to test it out, but you don't know how to do it, there's a really good repo by Streak called Key Hacks that has a bunch of links that you can utilize for a specific third party. So if you have a Slack token, just plug it in there, see what permissions you have. Obviously, if you get it as an invalid permission or something, that means the token was removed. So at that point, unless there's anything else on the document or on the repo, I don't think it will be worth reporting it. But if you have other tokens that are actually valid, see what else you can get out of it. And just in regards to that, I kind of want to give out a upcoming feature release kind of thing. Is in about 3 months, I'm releasing a feature close to Key Hacks. It is going to be an automated script where you can just plug in tokens and it will do a full exploit for it. So if you were to give it a Slack token, and if you choose aggressive mode, it will dump you all the messages for each channel that the token can access. So we're trying to utilize Key Hacks for that. So you will see the script come out within 3 months, I'll say, at the end of December. Yeah, Random Ravi has a really good, I think he also has regex for things you can look for directly in GitHub repos, which I have utilized in the past. I don't know if it's Random Ravi or someone else who disclosed that.
Just got a good question from Paperbag Prince asked, first they made an observation that it seems like chaining bugs together is what gets you the big bug bounties, or those thick bounties. So are there any bug chains that you find yourself chaining together over and over in your bug bounty hunting?
There's multiple chains you can do. So like if it's web security, there's XSS to CSRF to account takeovers and all of those attacks you can do. One thing that has happened to me a lot recently, and I even wrote about this, is following up on Ticket Trick that Inti looked at. Is when Inti disclosed about the blog or the exploit, you could just go to company's domain and then, or you could do the Ticket Trick and you could get into their Slack and other stuff. But Slack decided to secure that, so there was no like ways to exploit it. And when I started looking into it deeper, um, Ticket Trick will still work on a lot of companies, but I wanted to see how I could chain that to other places. And we used Google logins, so we verified the email on Google and then logged into every internal places we could from that, and got access to a lot of sensitive info. That has worked for me a lot in live hacking events, in other events, and it still works. So it hasn't necessarily been fixed by any companies. I will say there are still ways to attack it. It's just, to chain them, you have to know what your next chain will be. Once you start looking at it further, like once you start looking at Ticket Trick and then start testing how it works, I think you will have an idea of like how to chain them. So that's one of the biggest attack vectors that I've seen myself doing a lot of chaining over and over right now, because there's a lot of different ways you could, if like one door closes, there's another door always open in Ticket Trick to actually get into internal panels with those. There was a question about what is the most critical thing you found through the misconfig in G Suite. So there were couple of them. One of, in terms of Google Calendar, one of the most critical was getting that credentials that allowed us all the videos for internal interviews. We also had, for Google Docs, we have downloaded product, or we have got access to all, as I said, upcoming product features till 2021 or 2020 for companies. So not a critical, but like a high information disclosure for them. We also had, for a company, we were able to download their unreleased tools and unreleased features. So this is a company that builds softwares and other things, and we could actually download their upcoming features that's not even known to the public yet. And the kind of a good part on that is when we escalated it further, the internal softwares that we had actually allowed to find internal domains, and they had like test usernames and passwords for those, so we could log into those as well. So those have been another critical findings we had. Someone asked, what are public sources to find sensitive? So there's a lot of sources out there that have sensitive data. Trello is one of the biggest ones right now. We have found a lot of those. I keep forgetting the hacker's name, but he found a lot of those, and he has disclosed this in the past. I think he found one on the United Nations and other companies as well. Pastebin is a pretty useful one. It's not as useful now. I think it's, if you find it, it's probably some other hacker testing and putting information there as notes. But we have found stuff on like the Papaly, the bookmark website I mentioned. There are also slideshare.net, where companies tend to put their internal slides there and not realize it's public. So you can, not always like a security issue, but you can find internal info that you can use. So let's say, a classic example is, let's say if you find an SSRF and you don't know internal domains to hit, you can probably find slides that mention internal domains and just try those. GitHub is a perfect one. Asana is even better. I really like Asana. I'm not gonna lie, we have found a lot of stuff with that. Jiras are good. Specifically, look at the cloud Atlassian instances for companies and see if they allow public sign up. If it's like, let's say, bugcrowd.atlassian.net, and if you can go there and it shows you all the tickets there, it's already bad. So you probably want to check those out as well. Obviously, internal Jiras are even useful because those tend to have more security issues, I think, than the cloud version of it. Bitbucket is another good. GitHub is always useful. There's always a lot of things in GitHub to cover. There's also another slide sharing website called Prezi, which allows you to do animated slides. And we have found internal documentations of new features, internal even tickets info for support tickets. So employees will be doing a Google Docs, or like they'll be doing a presentation on internal support issues they got, and those will be made public. So that's really good for escalating it. I don't know what you mean by GSI issues. And what do you mean by open sub via API? So I'm not actually sure. Wolf Droid, what do you want me to spell out? I can probably type it in the message easier, which will probably be easier for everyone. In that case, there's also another one that was asked to me is, can you talk about some crazy bug that you recently found? So this one is a really good thing. I was doing some kind of a recon on a company, and there was a domain that allows signing up as referrals slash partners kind of thing. So when signed up, you could actually, like, it will take time to get verified. So they'll verify your account and they'll add you to an internal referral instance. But the interesting part of that is their internal instance had no access controls. So instead of just being a partner, I could be an admin. And it actually allowed me to get a list of all their customers, monitor their customers in real life. So whatever, like for example, if the customer was paying 100K for their services, I could see when they had paid that, when the next due date is, what their billing details is, and all of those sensitive info. So it's always those recon things that you don't think it'll work and it ends up working that are pretty critical. um, I've also had not recently, but not in bug bounties, when I was working, there was a company's website that allowed you to create badges. So I could just create there was an API request to create badge for the building, and you'll just send a request, put your name and your picture, and it will create a badge for you with the RFID on there, and you could just go to the office, scan it, and you could get access to the building. So there have been like pretty fun things that you can that I have found with different recon strategies on them. I think that answered pretty much all the.
Yeah, he was asking about Prezi, I think it was, which is Prezi, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Wolf Droid was asking to spell earlier.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good website I have used in the past for finding infos for companies.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone in the chat. Again, give them a round of applause. Rojan, where can people find you on Twitter and everywhere else, if you want to put that information up on the screen, or if
Yeah.
you have it on
So
a slide?
if you want to find me on Twitter, it's pretty much Uranium Hacker. Super easy to spell. You can just message me there. I'm also on Bug Bounty Forum. I don't go by my Uranium Hacker handle there, so you can just find me as Rojan Rijal on Bug Bounty Forum. And you can also message me on any other places you find, except for LinkedIn. Don't message me on LinkedIn. I don't use it a lot. So probably I think Twitter will be a perfect approach if you ever want to message me, since my Twitter is always open to DMs.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I hope you have
Thank you
an
very much.
awesome rest of your
Yeah.
day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah.